there's an old saying that everybody uses: we don't learn from our successes, we learn from our failures. And I add to that, if you haven't failed at least 3 times, you're probably not trying hard enough. So for me, it was always about failing, learning that lesson, getting myself back up, and finding the correct path again.
Hi, Hunter Hastings here. Today, James Harold Webb breaks down the truth between experience and education, why he believes failure is the only real teacher, and the difference between learning business in a classroom versus learning it while jumping on an airplane to save your company from bankruptcy. We'll talk about why intuition matters more than theory, why planning for the downside is the most underrated entrepreneurial skill, and the entrepreneurial mindset that enabled him to scale across industries. If you want the honest blueprint for entrepreneurial resilience, this is the episode.
This is the Value Creators Podcast, your source for a new kind of business education, escaping from business administration mode and entering dynamic entrepreneurship mode. We're guided by entrepreneurial economics, which is the source of all growth and positive change for businesses of all sizes in all markets. We talk to experienced experts in value creation so that there's business learning for you in every episode.
James, welcome to the Value Creators Podcast.
Hunter, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, it's great to talk to you. We're going to discuss today the differing value propositions of learning business by entrepreneurial experience versus a formal business education like an MBA. And in your book, which has a wonderful title, Redneck Resilience, A Country Boy's Journey to Prosperity. So we'll get into that. But you detail your journey as a self-made entrepreneur. So let's start there. Walk us through some history, some key moments that sparked your initiative. Why did you take that journey? And some of the experiences that might illustrate for us your hands-on action as opposed to formal education.
Sure, I appreciate you having me. Appreciate sharing my story. I'll give you the very beginning, and then we can kind of get into the details later.
Good.
Dumb country boy from Laurel, Mississippi, grew up with two 17-year-old parents, and decided to jump out on my own when I was about 16, and went to the local junior college because I'd been preached to my whole life about getting an education, and got that, became an x-ray tech through the college, and did the traditional work all the time, go to school at night, because again, I was focused on getting an education because I needed that piece of paper, or so I thought at the time, that piece of paper to advance my career. Eventually got into the corporate side of medicine versus the health side of medicine, and worked my way up the chain, and then took a flyer one day when a doctor reached out to me and said, would your company build an MRI center in Trinidad and Tobago? And I thought, well, the company won't do it, but I will. And I literally, that was the day I jumped from employee to being on my own. Secured one investor who was also a good friend of mine. And off we went to Trinidad and spent the next 3 to 4 years in Latin America and the Caribbean. Got great stories, great lessons that I didn't learn in school. Developed a silly line with my children called "They Didn't Teach Me That at Jones County Junior College." And so we used that line quite a bit as we talked about business and stories. Just a bunch of journeys. Happy to share with that what you think I should share.
Well, let's get into one of the things that you just talked about, the piece of paper. The formal name for that is a credential. And that's a big part of the proposition, that what people get an education for is a credential. And the value proposition is, hey, you can't figure out business unless you have this credential. But actually, you leapt into uncertainty with your Trinidad and Tobago story, and you learned that way. So tell us more about that and how you learned, what the outcome was.
Yeah, there's no question that the School of Hard Knocks is way better than the School of College, and experienced all sorts of crazy stories, crazy journeys. Learned a lot about staying focused, learned a lot about commitment. For example, with the Nicaraguan location that I opened up, I've spent 53 trips going back and forth to Nicaragua trying to make that deal work. Unfortunately, I never did. And so you also come a point in time where you learn where it's time to take a deep breath. You've been punched, you've been knocked down. Now it's time to get back up and pick a new direction. And at that point, I had about 5 locations across the Caribbean and Latin America, and just packed them up one day and had a buyer, international buyer, wanted to get in that business, and literally sold it in about a 2 week period of time. Made some money, made enough to pay my investors back, made enough to put a little money in the bank to rethink what I was going to do. And I knew I was never going to work for anybody else again.
Hmm.
It was really just starting my next journey, which led me back to Texas, which really where I started my true entrepreneurial journey.
Before you get to that, why do we call it the School of Hard Knocks, James? What I mean, that sounds like failure, and uh, it's just you can't point in the direction. You've got to kind of explore and maybe fall down some holes and climb out of them. Why do we call it the School of Hard Knocks? Tell us why
Yeah,
you think like that.
yeah, it is truly the school of hard knocks. When you're an entrepreneur and you're out there on your own and you're funding these deals out of your pocket, uh, you get hit pretty hard with some things. And there's an old saying that everybody uses: we don't learn from our successes, we learn from our failures. And I add to that, if you haven't failed at least 3 times, you're probably not trying hard enough. So for me, it was always about failing, learning that lesson, getting myself back up, and finding the correct path again, going down that road. School of hard knocks once again.
And so, learning how does that take place? So you have one of those hard knocks, call it a failure if you like. Do you sit back and say, well, here's why that didn't work in retrospect, or you just go and, well, let's try something else? Is it analytical or is it instinctive?
No, I think for me, it's been a little more instinctive than analytical, but you certainly have to look back so you don't make the same mistake again. The other thing I think that I relied on a lot was mentors. I had these people in my life that I could go to that had been down this journey, that had been through this school of hard knocks, that I could rely on as a resource. I've said that many, many times in my career that the single most important factor for me was relationships.
Hmm.
Having people I could count on, people I could look to, not necessarily for money, but for advice, for guidance, and help me get pointed back in the right direction. And it worked.
Let's explore that a little bit because I think it's important. So you said your first relationship was a good friend who was also an investor. What were some of the further relationships that you developed over time?
Yeah, I mean, you could go back to the very beginning when I developed different relationships with different people. A young lady by the name of Judy Cooper was my boss at the hospital, and she taught me how to manage people way better than I'd ever been taught before. I kind of came from a Theory X background where you do what you're told, period.
Hmm.
And I learned that you could actually encourage people, manage people. You could be their friend, you could still be their boss. There was a line you drew, but you could always do that. There was Barry O'Brien who taught me a little bit about the business side of medicine. That you could be a capitalist and you could take care of people at the same time. Steve Schulman, the gentleman that gave my first business loan, he was a physician who started one of the first medical imaging practices in the United States, and I learned a lot from him about partnering, joint ventures, things that made sense, and also the fact that again, you could provide health care at a high quality level and still make money. And that was the thing that a lot of people didn't understand. And that's probably one of my biggest lessons in life.
So, what was it about you, do you think, James, that attracted those kinds of relationships? Because relationships are two-way, right? You got to earn them and cultivate them and make them work.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people saw some things in me that maybe I didn't see in myself right away, and uh, I'm friend to all these people to this day. The ones that are still alive, unfortunately, a few have passed away, but I think they liked what they saw in me. I think they encouraged what they saw in me, uh, and in fact, one of my mentors, I ended up buying his company when he got in trouble one time, and so I became
Hmm.
the mentor to him, so to speak,
Yeah,
and took it on to a different level.
yeah, yeah. We have a fancy term for that, which is empathy. That you those people see you in a certain way, and you have the ability to look through their eyes and see what they're seeing. So there's some empathy there.
Absolutely,
Okay.
great word.
So what was the second stage? You sold the Nicaragua business and the other businesses you were in. What was the second stage of your journey?
Yeah, I sort of packed up and was living in Boca Raton, Florida at the time and doing some quote unquote consulting, tried to figure out the next route. And I had made an investment with a couple of buddies back in Texas in one outpatient medical imaging center. And supposed to be mailbox money, and you learn that it's not always mailbox money, and this one was not, and I was writing checks every month. And so one day I packed up a 3 week old baby, a 3 year old son, and a supportive but not necessarily happy wife, and moved back to Plano, Texas. I remember kissing her on the cheek and telling her, "I'll see you in 3 to 4 years. I got to go back to work."
Wow.
And we went back to work, and work we did. And many many lessons through those first 2 or 3 years that we learned. Some crazy stories, but we got through it and ultimately built the largest medical imaging company in Texas. And that was our first exit.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that. You say you learned a lot of things that you didn't expect. With different kinds of things, or
Yeah, I'll give you a great example of what they never would have taught me this at Jones County Junior College. We're sitting there one day, we're borrowing money from a major player, $1 billion fund that was publicly traded that would loan money to knuckleheads like me that had a lot of experience but not necessarily a lot of money. And they would back us. When I say back us, they would own us. They would
Mhm.
factor our receivables. We relied on them every week for a check. So if we had $100,000 in receivables, we'd look at the bank account, there'd be an $85,000 check in the bank account, and they would keep the receivables. And then one day there was no check there. And I made some phone calls and nobody answered the phone at the corporate level. Nobody sales answered the phone. And I do what you do as an entrepreneur. I jumped on a plane and flew to Philadelphia, walked in their office and was met with the FBI agent with a badge.
Wow.
Going, how can I help you? And it turns out that some of the executives there had been double selling paper. They would finance a deal for me, sell it to one bank, sell it to another bank. And in one single day, they went bankrupt and cut off our entire fundings. We went from making money to zero money coming in.
Wow.
Thank goodness a judge in Pennsylvania stepped in and another bank took over. And within a month, we were refunded at a much lower level. So we had to return, cut costs, regroup. And eventually we solved that problem and found another lender and went forward. But it was a huge learning lesson.
But you can't anticipate those kinds of things. So, what was the mindset that you developed? I mean, you have that shock, that unanticipated event. Do you then assume that stands for the rest of your journey? You expect that something unexpected is going to happen?
Yeah, I do. And I have developed a saying, which is I hope for the upside, but I plan for the downside. So
Yeah.
when I go into a business now, I always think about what I'm doing. I always go, what happens if it goes wrong? Do I have a plan in place? Not that I'm not focused on growth, not that I'm not focused on building my company, but I want to know if I'm doing something, what happens if it fails? And so
Hmm.
that's a big thought process for me, hoping for the upside, but planning for the downside.
So the value proposition of the business education and the MBA, James, is that you can't do that. You haven't learned administration. You haven't learned all of those methods and approaches that we're going to teach you. So you can't succeed in that kind of a situation. So give me the counter argument to that.
Yeah, well, listen, I think there's certain value in a piece of paper, an MBA, not what a lot of people think, but it gives you theological knowledge. It gives you, you know, not necessarily practical knowledge, but some structural things you can learn in the future. For me, I like real business experience where you have to use the skills that you learn and you practice them day and day and day. And
Hmm.
then something we talked about earlier, network building, huge thing, building networks and meeting people and learning from other people. And then we talked about learning with your failures, a big deal. So just a lot of those things to me, they just didn't teach me at Jones County Junior College or North Texas State or all the different places I went to try to get my different degrees.
But I'm just going to keep in this vein. They say scaling is the problem. You entrepreneurs might succeed in the early stages, but when the business starts to get big, you need that formal rigor and the training and methods and management in order to manage a scaled business. And you seem to be saying, no, you learn by scaling, not by managing.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that you don't have to know everything when you take the jump. You learn as you go, and I think that's a really important thing for me is knowing that I might not know about the structure, but I'll figure it out as I go along the way, and I'll have the right people in place. Which again is another critical factor. Is as I built my infrastructure, I built it with people that I trusted, people that I brought up through the ranks. I very seldom hired anybody at a high level that hadn't been through the ranks with me.
Hmm.
And I thought that was really important to building structure. Now, listen, you do have the CPA and you've got the things you need and the CFO and the things that are more structured as you get bigger. But by that point, you've learned it yourself. You didn't get it in college. You've learned what that means.
Yeah, so that's another aspect of relationships, the people you hire, right? The people you work with, your colleagues, your teams and so on. It sounds like you nurtured those, you kept them with you over the long term, as opposed to hiring, powerful new vice presidents from some bigger company as you got bigger. Is that accurate?
Yeah, at our height, between our multiple companies, we're talking about 2015, we had about 1,000 employees.
Wow.
I had 14 employees that were owners in the company with me. I got them shares and stock to the company. One of my proudest moments in life is when we exited. Well, first of all, 13 of the 14 stayed with me the entire journey. So I only lost one key employee for the whole 20 years. Two, uh, 8 of those employees became millionaires when we exited, and
Mm-hmm.
2 became multimillionaires. So I'm extremely happy about that fact that they were able to ride this thing with me and come out with me. And that was important.
Yeah, and one of the terms you find in people talking about in business is the ownership mentality. So you certainly gave those stockholders an ownership mentality, which is a deeper level of commitment, probably, and more passion. What about everybody else who maybe didn't have stock? Do you get the ownership mentality into those minds as well?
I don't know if it was ownership mentality, but we certainly created culture that
Yeah.
made them be part of the system. And we had, customer service retreats with the employees. We had management company retreats. At our height, we had probably 90 managers, and we would go off and do a 3-day retreat. And it wasn't about the business. It was about having fun. It was about communicating. It was about talking about the future and really getting them to buy in. But just really creating that culture, I think, is critical too. And we did a lot of that.
Well, that's important, James. So let me press you on it. How do we define culture? When you say that word, what do you have in mind? We're delighted to announce the Value Creators online course for entrepreneurs in every kind of business, big, small, or medium, at every stage, in every industry. Our course provides the foundations and principles on which to build success. Simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to creativity, innovation, and competitively superior business action. There are 11 foundational principles or mental models that together cohere into the value business model. Principles for value generation, principles for value operations, principles for value finance and accounting, and principles for value sustainability, as well as the new knowledge accumulation you'll need for continuous innovation. These principles are delivered by top business professors from top business schools: Mark Packard, Per Byland, Gordon Miller, David Rapp, and Bart Vanderhagen. You'll find video lessons from them, along with downloadable tools, processes, and other valuable content. Master these lessons, and you'll master the most important skill in business: value creation. Go to thevaluecreators.com and click the course link.
Yeah, for me, culture, is really about people somewhat thinking like I think. I'm trying to get them to thinking about the future, about taking care of people, but also about making money. In the
Mm-hmm.
healthcare sector, where I come from, predominantly, it's hard to get people to always think about making money because a lot of times it is about caring for people, and that's extremely important. I never want to minimize that. But we would talk a lot about and incentivize a lot. Almost every employee in the company had a bonus structure. At the manager's level, it was based on bottom lines of their clinics. At the marketing rep level, it was about how many patients they got in the door. At the front desk staff level, it was just number of patients total times a little percentage. So everybody was incentivized with a little extra money.
Yeah.
I remember one of my presidents, one of my company had a $90,000 salary, but they made $700,000 a year in distributions and bonuses, and that's huge when you
Mm-hmm.
see that for employees.
Yeah, we sometimes forget that's the ultimate incentive, right?
It is.
So that's two things now: alignment and the right the right incentives and culture. Um, you eventually exited that business too. Is that correct?
Yeah, we exited the medical imaging business in 2017, and it's public information. It was for 94 million, so it was my biggest paycheck. And we still had several healthcare companies we kept going, and then we had also ventured into the fitness sector. and transitioned from the corporate world to the franchise world, which is a whole different discussion. I learned a lot in that as well, and built those companies and exited all those over the next 5 or 6 years.
So the fitness sector, was that a subset of your medical or
No, it
healthcare
was a
business, or a
completely
separate
separate
one?
different company. I brought a couple of people from the healthcare side with me, and we started a
Mhm.
separate company. And we bought initially three Orange Theory fitness franchises for the Dallas market. And then Orange Theory approached us, and we eventually bought the entire North Texas territory. In over 5 years, we built or bought 33 Orange Theory fitness gyms, and it was so flipping hot. And one of those other lessons you learn in life as you do more businesses, I go into business now and then with an exit in mind, and that was a 5 year plan. Build them, package it up with a investment bank, and get it to the market, and we did, and we sold that one in 2019 for a pretty big chunk of money.
So how is the franchise sector different from the ownership sector?
Yeah, I use this term, and I mean this in a nice way, but when you're in the franchise world, you have a boss. Whether you like it or not, the franchisor is the boss. And it
Yeah.
took me a little bit of learning that, and it cost me a little money because I tried to deviate some products with Orange Theory, and they would let me. And so, once I learned, here's the rules, stick by the rules, it was fine. But you do absolutely, without any question, have a boss in the franchise world.
Yeah. Did you enter that business or that franchise because you thought it was on trend, or was it more circumstantial than that, more
Now, this is
opportunistic?
a cute side story, and you may edit this out, I'm sure, but I was a widowed husband raising two little boys by myself, and met a young lady on Match.com. And after a couple of 2 or 3 years, we were in a meeting in Boca Raton, Florida, and a buddy said, "Hey, have you ever heard of Orange Theory Fitness?" And this is 2014, and I won't use the language I used, but it was basically, "No, I haven't." And I took the workout the next day, and I liked the workout, but what caught my attention was, again, that culture, the trainer. I've said the trainer bled orange, and that caught my attention. And I initially bought my fiance, now wife, three franchises if she would quit her job and move in and take care of me and my two boys. And she did. And then shortly thereafter, Orange Theory contacted us, and you know, it was kind of a nice egotistical conversation. You're James Webb. You've done this before. We'd like you to be a bigger player, and we worked it out.
So we'll definitely keep that in, James. That's a great story. So you were approached by them because you're a
They
good
approached me about the
franchisee.
area, yes, not about the actual franchise, but about the area, and we cut a really sweet deal. And like I said, we once the brand got known, and that's nothing about franchise; it's a brand. Once the brand gets known, we couldn't build them fast enough. I mean, it was nuts.
Maybe that
So
was more to do with your wife than you, huh? The reason they recognized the
probably
expertise.
so. Yeah, she sort of stepped back after a while to kind of handle the corporate side of it, and I brought in a team and brought in a new president, and he built a team. And I sold it in 2019, and my team is still there running it to this day. So I talk to them about once a month just to check in.
So you've hit on an interesting point here. So the expertise, the entrepreneurial expertise that you built up in the healthcare business, was transferable in some way to scaling the franchisee business. So tell us about that. What was transferable and what wasn't?
Yeah, listen, there's two distinct parts of it. There's the knowledge of the business, what it takes to run a fitness business, but then there's just the general knowledge of running a business, and that was critical because I knew how to run a business. Now I'd done it enough. I knew how to employ the right people. I knew how to build the culture. More specifically, I knew where to find the financing, which is always important
Mm-hmm.
to get to that level. Did I know the fitness industry? No. Did I love Orange Theory? I love the brand. I took the class twice in 5 years. I was not a group kind of fitness guy. I was a put my earphones on and go to the gym guy,
Yeah.
but I knew that everybody else liked it. And so once we, again, had that internal culture and things that we brought with us, it didn't really matter that we didn't know a lot about the industry. We learned the industry as we grew it, but the business side of it, that's general, and no matter what you're doing.
Those sound like principles, James, the principles that you learn running a business, as opposed to methods and strategy and analysis and so on like that. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. The principles is a great way to analyze it, and there's principles related to people management. There's principles related to financial management. there's things that you never even think about until you get hit with those hardcore decisions and you make them. And sometimes you're right, and sometimes you're not, and you keep going.
Hmm. Do you sit back and think about that? What principles have I learned? Or it just becomes kind of natural behavior? It evolves as you do more and more of your work.
Yeah, for me, it's a natural behavior. I mean, it's just as inside me now, and it's a distinctive thing that I just do. I don't ponder a lot of decisions anymore. I just make them,
Yeah.
and I think that's more of an experience over time. At this point, it's 58 years in the business world, so you kind of get some gut things that just happen.
Yeah, so that gets to be our point a little bit. What we're trying to do in business education is say that, hey, you've got to recognize, at least for entrepreneurship, that a lot of it is intuitive, creative. You develop a sense for it. As you say, you don't ponder decisions, you make them, then you see what happens and you adjust. Do you think people can learn that from education, or do you have to get into a business like you did and figure it out as you go?
I think you can learn some of the processes. I think you can learn certain ways to think about stuff. But my personal opinion is until you've been out there and until you've been hit between the eyes and had to solve a major problem, um, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
I love some of the stuff they're doing at the colleges now with these new entrepreneur programs. I love these Shark Tank events they're doing at colleges. George Washington has the third largest in the world, and I've been a judge there 3 times. So it's great to see these students get up there and do their pitch and fight through it. And I've even invested with a couple of them and watched them grow their businesses. I mean, I love that part of that part of college. I love.
Hmm. Yeah, although we think, James, that maybe when the colleges try to teach entrepreneurship, they slip back into administration. That they try to teach those rules and methods when gathering experience is better. So the Shark Tanks are great, but actually building a business is it's more than one Shark Tank event, right? It's all of those sequential things and learning and so on like that you're talking about. So I'm not sure the colleges get that.
No, I don't think they get that completely, but I do. I'm starting to see a little bit of it. I'm involved with a couple of other colleges and some of their programs, and yeah, there's still the formal education. I get it, but I'm seeing a little bit of it now, where they've got these entrepreneur programs where they're working with local businesses now to create internships and things outside of the college, which are important. So hopefully they'll figure this out.
We're trying to think about a business education, James, that combines the two, that you can learn some of the principles, maybe look at some entrepreneurial history and learn how people did those kinds of things, but then do some kind of an apprenticeship or an internship. We're not sure how to call it, but go work with somebody, for somebody on a team in a real business. As you say, you can't get hit with the problems like an owner does, but you can deal with the problems that a team does and makes errors and learns and so on like that. So combine the two. Do you think that's possible?
I do think it's possible. In fact, it's funny because when I was in high school, you're talking about in the 70s, I was part of the DECA program, Distributive Education Clubs of America. And I went to school from 8 to 12 every day. And then I had a job after that. I got through the school and I had to leave the school, go work my job for 4 hours a day. And I had my school learning and then 4 hours a day I had my business learning. And this is, you're talking about a 16-year-old kid doing this. So I'm a
Yeah,
huge
wow.
fan of that.
So I've never heard of that. So tell me again about that program. What happened to it?
I have no idea what happened to it, but it was when I was a kid. It was Distributive Education Clubs of America. They had them all over. We were in South Mississippi, so all the high schools had one. We called them the DECA program, and we had to have our parents sign off on it. And then if the school signed off on it, you went to school 8 to 12, and they had jobs lined up for you. Now I found my job outside of the schools at that time, but I had the time off from school and the ability to go learn in the real world. And I went from padding paper with a print shop to being the head pressman by the time I graduated high school to running the whole business when I was in junior college.
Wow. So was that a private enterprise initiative or a government initiative or some combination, or what was
It
it?
was all private. It was all private companies in
Yeah.
town that employed that had the students. There was probably, my guess is, 40 or 50 of us that did it out of a high school that had, three or 400 per class.
But were they all over America or just in your location?
So the DECA program at the time was all over America, as I recall. I mean, we went to the DECA convention for the state, and then there was a national DECA convention that, unfortunately, I never went to. I have no idea what's happened to that program now, but it was specifically what you're talking about, education and working.
Okay. Well, I'll dig into that. I didn't know about it. So thanks for the information. And an interesting point about it is that's high school age, not college age, right? Is that
High school.
is that where we should start our entrepreneurial learning? Is high school?
I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of times I've looked back on my life and, I climbed the corporate ladder for years until I was, 30, 37 years old. I climbed the corporate ladder and I've wondered what would have happened had I jumped earlier.
Yeah.
I came out okay, but it would have been nice if I jumped earlier. Thought about that a ton. So, talking to my own children, my own family about jumping and setting up businesses. And so it's kind of cool. And to get that experience in high school was really helpful.
Yeah, and that's the mindset we teach, isn't it, James? That climbing the corporate ladder is a good thing. It's in fact it's the aspirational thing. It's what you should do, and that kind of implies working for somebody else, being compliant, doing what you're told, so you can climb the ladder properly. I, that seems to be like the wrong mindset.
I don't know if it's the wrong mindset, but it's definitely a different mindset. And
Yeah.
I look back and there are people I know that they need to climb the corporate ladder. That's what they should do, and they get a nice retirement plan and they're happy. But if you ever want to build, true wealth, true generational wealth, it's hard to do it climbing the ladder. You have to be an entrepreneur and you have to jump.
So you would you advise people to do that initially, join the company, get some experience, and then start your own business, or would you dive in straight from high school or college?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to dive in straight from high school to college. Certainly, some people do, and as I mentioned, I helped sponsor two kids at the George Washington University that jumped and started their own businesses. Uh, but there's also, one of the things about being in the corporate world that's positive is the networking. You meet a lot of
Mhm.
people, and a lot of times we don't take advantage of that. So I would encourage people that if you do go the corporate route initially, keep your eyes open and your ears open and learn from people, meet people, and network, network, network. And then when you see that opportunity, jump.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can have the entrepreneurial mindset while you're climbing the ladder and looking out for those contacts and network elements and so on like that will be useful to you in the future.
Yeah, I can tell you, I did for 4 or 5 years have the entrepreneurial mindset and kept trying to figure where to go, trying to figure where to go. And, uh, you get a little comfortable. You got children coming, you got a nice salary. And I thank that doctor every day for walking in and telling me about Trinidad and Tobago.
Hmm.
That's the day I jumped.
Yeah. Yes, it was a trigger, but had you been thinking about it before? I mean, I'm trying to explore this mindset. Is it kind of ready in you, and then suddenly the trigger happens and you jump, or is it building up over time? Can you remember?
Yeah, for me, I was at a job. I was working a corporate job in Dallas, Texas. I was 30 years old. I was a senior vice president of a company, sitting on the eighth floor office building, looking out over the city of Dallas. And I got a phone call one day that said, "Mr. Webb, we just sold the company, and since you have no equity, you're fired." Literally on the
Hmm.
spot, fired. And I kind of realized at that moment that I had been a working dog for someone else and not for me. And so while I had a family to support and bills to pay, so I went and got another job. But that's really the moment I started thinking about how do I get out from under these people? How do I get my own thing going? And
Yeah.
it still took a little bit of time, another 5 years.
Yeah. So it's moments are important, right? These trigger moments, like you got the phone call about Trinidad and Tobago, you got fired, and so you learned something then, as opposed to some development path. It seems like there's a bunch of moments where your learning increases exponentially for that time.
Not any question. You learn a lot with those kind of phone calls.
Yeah, yeah. But there must be something in your mind. Did you ever think when you were a kid you were going to start a business when you were stacking paper and being a pressman?
So there's a little cassette recording that my mom has, and if I hadn't heard it myself, I wouldn't believe it. But it was in high school at the brunch at our church, and the teacher's saying, "What are you going to do after high school?" And there's a little tiny voice named James Webb that goes, "I'm going to change the destiny of a family." And I said that when I was 17 years old, and that stuck with me forever. And that was really not that there's anything wrong with being an electrician, which my dad was, an air conditioning guy or trade. Those are great things to do. But I knew if I was going to change the destiny of the family, I would have to do it on my own. And again, it took time, it took learning, it took lessons, but it got there.
Yeah, that's a great story. So you somehow you had that commitment from an early age.
Yeah, I think when you grow up like I did and you watch your parents working, 100 hours a week and
Yeah.
putting food on the table, and I learned really early in life I wanted anything other than food on the table, I had to do it myself. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we did.
So you wrote a book. We appreciate that. And there's a lot of helpful information and guidance in there. What's next for you, Harold? What does the entrepreneur do at this stage?
So, it's kind of funny. I keep thinking I should quit and relax, but I actually started another company about 2 years ago, and it's in the franchise world. I found that as I've gotten older, those are easier to do.
Uh-huh.
And I have a president running it, so I'm more of the advisor and the bank check behind it. But we've got 6 stores open, going to build about 20 stores. Already have our exit planned, and I think in 5 years that might be it for me. Other than that, I spend a great deal of time here in Mexico, living the dream life. Live in a gorgeous community here with a wonderful golf course, and got my kids, all 5 kids, and my 7th grandchild coming in a couple of weeks. So life be pretty good.
Are you doing any education yourself? Are you mentoring or helping other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, doing a lot of mentoring. I have tons of people that I work with, not just that are my employees, but also just outside of that. I was a keynote speaker at the University of North Texas last spring semester, and picked out several people out of that have called me and connected. Working with them on their entrepreneur program, working with them on their Shark Tank program. So yeah, I'm enjoying those kind of things. Also got involved in some boards, a couple of profit boards, a couple of nonprofit boards that let you give your opinion and share some of your experience while you don't really have to be fully accountable. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little bit of a pessimist about entrepreneurship in America, James, that we're kind of losing it. There's too much regulation and too much limitation, and people are too nervous about the kind of risks that you took in your life. And you were very successful. You learned from whatever failures you had. You didn't really have any failures. You learned and you ascended. Do you think that? Do you think we're less entrepreneurial as a country, as a national frame of mind than we were, or is that wrong?
No, I actually believe I agree with you on that statement. I think that our culture is changing, continues to change. I think there's things that are impacting that, both the stuff with AI, for example, is just one thing everybody talks about. But we also are in a climate where a lot of people just aren't willing to take that jump.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of things have been given to them. And, I do agree with you. There's less entrepreneurials than I'd like to see.
Yeah. So we have to change the national culture, James, do you think?
No question.
Yeah.
No question. We're trying. It'll take time.
Good. Well, we're in the same boat as far as that goes. Well, so we'll make a link to your book so that everybody can acquire it and read it. Is there anywhere else you'd like people to find you where you're helping?
No, you can find me on my website, jamesharoldwebb.com.
Okay.
And my contact information is there. I'm happy to give advice. I probably take a couple of phone calls a day. People just saying, "Hey, I got an idea. What do you think?" Or "I got a problem. Can you help me?" And 99% of the time, it doesn't involve money, just education. So that's kind of nice. But I do enjoy it.
Good. Well, I think that's the best kind of education is from people who've done it and they can share some of their experience as opposed to teaching it from a theoretical standpoint. So
Absolutely, brother.
good. Well, thank you very much for today, James. We appreciate it, and we'll see if we can send a few phone calls your way.
Well, Andrew, I appreciate your time. I really do. It's been a pleasure, brother. Take care of yourself. Be safe tonight.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of the Value Creators Podcast. Thanks for listening. You can visit thevaluecreators.com for links and resources related to this episode. And check hunterhastings.com for more content on entrepreneurial business management based on value creation principles.